Hey everybody, I'm Pooch Van Druten, and that is...
This is Chris Rabold, y'all.
It's Chris Rabold, and we're back. Did you think we were going to leave you alone forever?
What did you think, people? I do wonder. What did we think?
What did we think? Yeah, no, exactly. But, yeah. Merry Christmas, y'all. We thought we should put a couple of these out kind of as a Christmas gift to ourselves and to you guys. So that we keep doing this, because every time we run into you out there, we sure do appreciate all you guys talking about how much previous episodes have influenced you, and I think this is like close to our 50th episode, or maybe a little more.
I remember when we stopped, we were just shy of 50. So
right. So yeah, and listen, guys, it's not for lack of want.
Oh no,
to do
not
this
at all. Oh my God.
I mean, we sincerely enjoy ourselves, and we are so happy and so humbled that you guys have had such a great response, and if we could do this all the time and pay our bills, we'd probably do it. You know what I mean? So,
sure.
Anyway, just wanted to say thank you, and throw that out there at the beginning here, and welcome back.
Yeah, and I like what you said too. Is and I didn't see it coming when you said as a gift to us first, because we have not through life and life's lifiness have not been able to do this.
Yes,
even on the casual level.
No, that's really right. And that's, I mean, as you remember, guys, I know you know this, but as you remember, this started as us just calling each other pretty much on a weekly basis, or at least once a month, calling and having a chat for an hour and a half about what's happening in audio world and all that. And we haven't even been doing that. And I miss that too.
Yeah. And that's, and that, whatever, we're all part of the same thing here, but, I had to dip out for a little while, and I didn't have the bandwidth to do it with my friend. I didn't have the bandwidth to do it with my friend, let alone my friend's,
Sure. And I mean, and all of us, whatever, it's not an excuse, but we get busy, and whatever, things slip through the cracks. But anyway, we're here. We're going to talk about some stuff today, and hopefully it's engaging and entertaining for y'all. So with that in mind, what do you want to talk about today, Chris?
I tell you what, it's been on my mind only because it's been topical for me as I've, been back at it again, gratefully, which is an understatement of a lifetime. Gratefully so. I haven't had anything that I've been married to or locked in with. So I've been picking up a lot of projects. And with that, it's like I'm constantly amazed of when I look at what the project is, I look at how much time it is, and I'm quickly assessing how do I work out my process given that amount of time. So if you give me 2 days, that process looks one way. If you give me 2 years, now the joke is we all want results within 2 seconds. So that's in there somewhere too. Even on the 2-year gig, the 2-year gigs, chances are that's the one where you really want to, well, you always want to make a big impression right out of the gate. So
of course,
it's not like I'd take my time more, but given the time available, it does adjust, augment, what have you, how I go about things. And it's just made me think. In fact, when Pooch and I exchange sometimes, like, what do you want to talk about? I don't know. Here's some ideas. And maybe that comes via text, or we share a Google Doc, or I sent him a shared note last night. I just jotted some things down on the couch. And I was thinking about one of the gigs that I did where I realized I was like, okay, because I procrastinate a lot, as a lot of us anxiety-riddled perfectionists do.
That's number one problem that I have is
and then the perception, because once you get going, the perception is, whoa, no one works harder than Pooch. You know what I'm saying? But they don't know
what it took to get there, though. You know what I mean? There. Yeah,
exactly. So I realized at one point during a thing, and I'll talk about it here, it was midnight, and I had been working since 8 a.m. And I realized, I was like, fuck, now I'm really mixing. But then I was also like, sweet, now I'm really mixing.
Yes.
So I want to talk about what that looks like for us. Maybe we can start out with when we get a project where there are tracks, there are existing tracks. In other words, we can do playback.
Yeah.
What does that start look like, or the process look like? And then maybe if we feel like it, we can touch on in a more organic, old school, like throw and go, dialing it up live. What does that look like?
Sure. Before we get into the nitty gritty of that, and this is something that I advocate, like in my masterclass and some other things, is the work that happens before you arrive on site to any gig. Even if it's a dial up throw and go, like even if you called me at midnight and said, hey, I need you at 8 a.m. to be wherever, I would spend that time from midnight until 8 a.m. building a file, an offline file that allows me to get ahead, right? It has all the pieces in it that allow me to kind of throw something up very quickly. And if I didn't do all of that busy computer work prior to my arrival, there would be an hour or more of on the surface itself, just assigning and whatever, making buses and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, deciding what inserts are going to waves and all those kind of things. All of that takes time that a client doesn't give a crap about.
Yeah.
Right?
As you're saying this is, we were joking, not joking about the procrastination and then the going really hard thing. Much of it is to craft a narrative. Much like the procrastination then leads to hard work, and the perception is, oh, what a hard worker. The diligence and the planning that goes into things creates a perception of, because it's a reality of, in the moment, the things you're not doing are going, oh, hold on, guys.
Hold on a second.
Yes.
That should never, ever happen. Never. I watch guys do that and I cringe. I'm like, oh.
Yes. And it's because it is cringe worthy. It is a vibe killer.
Yeah.
It's just, and now it happens and it's going to happen, or things are going to crash, or it's going to, but if we can mitigate how much that waiting happens, again, the perception is, wow, what an efficient, well-oiled machine of a human this mixer is that I now have in my presence. This is why they're here. Oh, I get it. It just creates such a good vibe, or it creates the right vibe to start from. From
the bottom to the top. So for instance, if you are quickly working with a drum tech, for instance, and you're getting through their drums quickly, they're going to tell their drummer that, hey man, this is the only guy I've ever worked with that like got drum sounds in like 5 minutes, and they're amazing. I went out front and they sound amazing, and he did it in 5 minutes. I don't know how that happened. And then the drummer tells the principal, and boom, you're in. I mean, all of those things matter, right? And so making the appearance that you're a magician is invaluable. It makes you valuable.
Yep. As you're saying that too, of the many benefits of coming in prepared, diligent, prepared, and a lot of it comes from experience. Now, the guys, that could mean you've been at this for 1 month experience, or you've been at this for whatever, 30, 40 years experience. But because of that experience, you can predict things that are going to happen, things that you're going to need to do. And that's the preparedness.
Yeah.
But of the many benefits that you like, the ones you're talking about, there's side stuff too, such as You're right. God, you talk about a drum tech. And when you talk about starting mixes, like, of course, my brain goes straight to drums. You know what
right.
I mean? But, if that drum tech is like, oh, God, I'm going to have to get up there for 20 minutes. And because of that, they're bummed out. They never hit it the same way twice. They're not giving their all. There's some empowerment that we can give to our coworkers where you're like, essentially you're getting sounds and you're like, yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Now keep going. Okay, okay, great. In other words, like, yeah, no, you nailed it. In other words, hey, you were prepared.
You did. Yeah, right. You had your shit together. Yeah.
And it just, again, creates such positivity, such a place to work from. And, first impressions are everything. And, oh, Lord, I've had my share of not so great first impressions and survived them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
A lot. My initial dealings with Lady Gaga 15 years ago, which turned into, on again, off again thing for quite a while.
Yeah.
They were not great. I learned so much from how not great they were, but I survived them. And in time, it all worked out. But if you can,
is there anything you can share about like what something that you did that it was like, oh man, that was,
I got
cringy.
one for sure.
Yeah.
There's two that stick out. Well, one, I came from like rock and roll world,
right.
And more so than that, kind of like jam band rock and roll world.
Right.
It's like people are just not overly nice. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some sharks there too, but pretty cutting, pretty this and that. I'm going into this gig, and this is 2010, and I figure out who it is because they wouldn't tell me at first, and then
of course,
and then I realize, oh wow, that's her. She's the one that's having that moment. And I'm like, well, her name's Lady Gaga. I'm like, well, surely that's not what she goes by. So I look up her real name, and I have in my back pocket that I can't wait to unleash with such, oh yes. And as soon as we start talking, I think I looked her in the eye. I mean, and I had never been in an environment like that either.
Sure.
There's just tons of people and security, and everyone's self-important, and everybody kind of has their eye on you to fuck up.
Yeah, right.
Or at the very least, you to do something that they can capitalize on.
Totally. That turns the attention away from them. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget, I was standing behind a profile. She walked in and they did the big introduction. To me, I'm just normal Chris at that time.
Yeah.
Anyway, I called her by her name. Now, no one said anything.
Yeah.
But everyone looked at me, and she did not reply to the question as I had conveyed it with her. Like, she kind of sidestepped it. And
there was a weird awkward moment?
It was a very weird, awkward. And I was just sitting there just like a dumb puppy dog, like, do I get my treat now? And it was just, that set the stage. There was that. There was a lot of things. There was something later.
That's great,
anyway,
dude.
That was the main one.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great.
And I just learned until someone tells me otherwise.
That's right.
You know what? And that's a part of this how does a gig start thing too. I didn't know at that time because I was so new to that world. And I was also so new to like jumping in and out of new gigs. I would typically, I was either like a house guy, a company guy, or I would stay with someone for a really long time. Now I know meticulously to figure out all the names, to figure out who matters, to notate these things in my phone. You know what I'm saying? I know, and I put it in sequence of who is most important. And I separate, there's the super inner core. There might be mom or dad, manager, spouse, whatever. Then the band has their section. Then the techs have their section. The MD has I learn everything so that it just not clunky and awkward and weird, as best it can be.
That's fantastic, dude. And I do exactly the same thing. There is a piece of paper. I'm old school and write it down. I don't put it in my phone. There's a piece of paper that sits on my console that first day.
Yep.
And what's even trippier about this is a gig like even Iron Maiden that I go away from for like 8 months and then come back to. Sometimes that first day, guys that I've known for a couple of years, I have their names in front of me so I don't screw it up,
Yeah.
And that sounds horrible. It sounds like I don't remember their names, but you know what I mean? You go away for 8 months and then you come back to something, your brain's, on something else. But
and not only, it's not like we're going away for 8 months and going into hibernation either.
Right.
There are thousands of others.
Right.
Assume
that's exactly
that role.
right.
I'll tell you what, quite famously take white gaff tape or board tape and just put it all over my desk when I start rehearsing. And I will have a section for everyone's, at least musicians and techs. And I don't mind that they come in there and see that. And
that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, you're important to me. You're right fucking there.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
It shouldn't be a thing. It shouldn't matter to them that you are having to know or wanting to know their names. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So, and in time that all goes away, and then you remember, and it's all.
But I have the same thing, same kind of hierarchy thing, but also, next to the drummer's name is their tech, and next to the guitar player is their tech, so that I can, instead of, hey, guitar guy, can you play some guitar for me? I mean, that always says that's horrible. It sucks.
It does suck.
And
likewise, it sucks
I'm
to be called sound man
at it. Yeah, exactly. Who's sound guy? And I'm horrible at it. Like when people introduce themselves to me, I oftentimes, if I don't take that moment to immediately like write down their name somewhere, I a lot of times I screw that up. And so literally 4 minutes after they've introduced themselves to me, I'm like, hey, guy.
And that's when you reference the sheet.
That's
and
right.
You go to the bass tech's name who you wrote down, and you go, hey, Ernie.
Yeah.
Because you know his name.
You know Ernie.
What's drum tech's name again?
Right. What's his name?
And you pray they don't go, Scott.
Yeah, right.
That happens too. But yeah, anyway.
But yeah, listen, this is all, you would think when we started this thing today, we would be immediately talking about how it's like, okay, so I gain a kick drum up to this, and this is where I start. That's not where it starts. Where it starts is where we're talking about, way before you even get to touching things on your console,
Yeah. I'll say this, and we'll talk about, okay, well, what does, I brought the topic up. How do I know when a mix is started? It's, that's kind of the point. But I will tell you, one of the things, they all look different, the things that I've done. One of them was super last minute. And I mean, like within 24 hours, super last minute, get on a plane, make my way out there. And I was there. I had no time to do anything, but there was still, I could tell there was still more political work to be done. There was a phone call. There was a conversation I needed to finish before that made me feel confident. Now, the procrastination bug is in there somewhere too, and it's kind of a subconscious thing. Like I have to kind of check myself. But and I'll just tell you, on this one particular gig, it was talking to the guy who had made, there were tracks in the gig. It was talking to the producer who had made the tracks.
Okay.
And I could tell in talking to him that he was highly invested in his work. From that, I could also everything is a series of clues. From that, I could also tell he is coveted by the camp for his work. So he's just going up the ladder.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
As I'm speaking to him, and it allowed me to go in, walk in, and I knew at the very core of what I was working on, I had talked to the person who had made it, and to this person's credit, I was going in because there was a problem. To this person's credit, everything I heard from his original 2 mix was so solid and so consistent, which made me feel really good, because the person I would need to go back to, I felt confident in their abilities.
Totally.
But upon walking in, it wasn't a flex, but it felt good to go, oh, yeah. I just got off the phone with Skip.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's just another thing to kind of prop me up in what was a very difficult, almost unrealistic project. Anyway, needless to say, yes, you and I have not mentioned the technical thing yet.
Yeah.
And we're not harping on this flippantly or to be cute or funny. I'm telling you, this is the stuff. This is what matters. It all matters. And this is part of what all matters, including the frequencies and the tech.
Yeah. Obviously. All of these little pieces, any one of them can get you fired right away. You know what I mean? Quick. So it's like I'm telling you, like the first 24 hours of any gig, especially if it's a larger gig that's going to be a long-term thing or whatever. I mean, even if it's not, even if it's a one-off, whatever, there is this 24-hour period where, man, you could step in a pile of poop, or you could, or you could succeed. And these are the type of things that help you to be the guy that doesn't step in the pile of poop.
Yeah. And now here's a good segue perhaps into what does this process look like for us?
Yeah.
Let's start, if you're cool with it, start with like a playback type mix. In other words, we get tracks.
Sure.
And with that in mind, one of the gigs I went to go fill in for a friend of mine was not able to do they had just wrapped a big tour. This person had moved on with their life. The artist had scheduled like a private one-off. I went in there. It wasn't through my friend. It was through another friend who was the PM, I think. Yeah. Anyway, they called me to go in. And I was looking at the schedule, and the schedule was fly up to Lidditz, I think it literally was just one full day of work at Lidditz, which I see that and I say full day and full night. I'm looking at every single, Pooch was not kidding, y'all, when he said if he gets can you be there at 8 a.m. that he works until, that's exactly
I'm working for those 8 hours. Yeah.
100 million% is that happening. So I look at the schedule and I go, all right, I got a full day. Then we had a day where the trucks were going to be there at supposedly like 5 or 6. That was going to be like line check, make sure everything's working, blah, 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 blah. That was the time that I had. And then there was some rehearsal, and then there was a gig, and that was it. The whole thing was 10 days maybe. And I told myself, and in time, I would verbalize this to someone else around there as I started staying late. That first night came, and it was a lot of it. First, I came in, and I was trying to do what I never do, which is use someone else's file. And sometimes you have to.
You do.
Sometimes you have to.
Sometimes you do. Yeah.
And then, in time, much like you and I did for Bieber, in time, I will morph it into mine, just like you did, and then right up into the sunset, right? This was truly me trying to do an exercise where I was like, I usually don't do that. I only ever start from scratch. Let me be like Mr. Laid Back guy that comes in and takes the show file. It became very apparent for a number of reasons that wasn't the move. And so then halfway through the day, I went, forget this, I'm starting from scratch. So that then took my computer. I did a lot of it offline. I then got to the point to where I did, blah, 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 blah. And I told someone, one of the techs that was there, I said, yeah, whatever happens tonight. And what I meant was when I get done with all this busy work, and I get that file meticulously made, like you and I are talking, this will be the most important day I have of this whole run. And that included the show day.
Yes.
And in the end, that's exactly how it worked out. So that being said, when did I really start mixing? Came in, was working under the guise that I would use this other show file. I was kind of reverse engineering some things. Sometime after lunch, I determined that wasn't, I had told everyone, I was like, I bet you I end up making my own. I determined that it wasn't in my best interest to use that file. So I, from scratch, started making a show file. Right. Now I've since done what you and I often talked about, is where I now have a full, only in Digico world, I have a full, it's because you can convert and quickly shift things around. When I say template, it is a template.
Yeah.
In that it has inputs for sure label, but the output and the gazillion different buses that I always make. I finally have made one of those to where this won't take me as long as it used to.
Good.
Yes, it took me forever, but I did. But at this time I didn't have that. So I sat down, I was banging everything out. We were also troubleshooting the bigger picture, which is, everything talking between monitor world and front of house. There's a lot of other stuff going on, but for me, and my focus is I just want to get to where everyone leaves and I'm just mixing.
Right.
Anyway, so we go. Everyone leaves. I'm like, oh, I'm going to stick around, you guys. I know good and well I'm burning the midnight oil, like seeing the sun come up. And I kind of like that too. I used to love it. Now I realize how important it still is, but my energy is rationed differently to where I can't do that every single day. So it was a little bit of like, shit, do I still have this in me? Because you pay the price. It takes a while,
Yeah.
At about 12:30 that night, or in the morning rather, I had a moment where, I had been I told the guys that prepped, I said, look, and I stressed this so hard, I use my words clearly. I said, I want to be able to walk in there and hit space bar and everything's coming back at me, you know? And I don't mean that in like a demanding white glover kind of way, but I told him, I'm like, guys, I'm not the super tech. I'm not the this. I'm not, but I tell you what I am, and I'm the mixer. Right. So please be prepared for me to come in. And they were. So throughout the day, I'd been hitting play and just kind of checking out the sounds and seeing what was what. But there was a point where I realized I was like, okay, it's really happening. And I can tell you what that looks like for me now. And it does look different from a live mix. We're dialing it up live, where I'm typically just going kick onward. You know what I mean? In a sensible way, to your point with text, when I have the people to play. What I now do, because if I start with just kick and snare and I'm in a playback scenario and I can kind of sit there for a really long time, I will end up with, you're just hearing kick, hack, kick, hack, kick, hack, and it just stops sounding like music, and you're so deep in on the, you know, it just, there's nothing vibey or musical about it.
Right.
So
just real quick, I want to clarify something. When you're talking about playback, you're talking about virtual playback. You're not talking about tracks, right?
Correct. And and I'll clarify that. Yeah. Virtual sound check, for playback, right. Whatever.
So for instance, and I wanted to point this out while you were talking. I didn't mean to interrupt
this is
you.
important.
I don't want to interrupt you, but it is so important that the faster that you can start collecting data, in other words, the faster you can hit that record button, the better off you're going to be, because it allows you to do what you're doing. So keep going.
Exactly. So, and to your point, prior to this gig starting, you know, of course, I'm asking all the questions about whatever all the questions might be. But real soon, real early on in those conversations are there tracks? Can we get tracks? In fact, before I spec anything, before I do anything, let's work through getting those tracks where they need to be, because that's mission critical stuff. Could I do it without it? 1,000,000%. Sure. Am I way better with it? 8,000,000,000,000%, you know? So what that looks like for me nowadays, when I realize through in a virtual sound check scenario that I am okay, the train has left the station, we've started, I do start with the kick drum. But I start with it in a way where I'm looking at the meters and I'm predicting. I'm not even predicting. I know where, per me and my meanness, where that's probably going to land, all the way down at the very end on the stereo bus. So throughout the day, I may have been pulling that kick up, EQing it a little, trying this, trying that, and then pulling it back down and going on with something else. I'm crafting it and shaping it to land exactly, because that's the cornerstone of the mix, right? If I have that at -1, ain't nowhere to go. You know what I mean? If I have it at -30, there's too far to go.
Yeah.
So I start with the kick and I get something that I'm, cool enough with, right? Or, cool with. I then move on to, if they're traditional overheads, meaning they're not like spot mic, cymbal mics, which is the case. In that case, I might just pull up the snare. But usually what I do is I've got the kick just thumping away, and it's landing where I need it to land in the stereo bus. And that also means whatever buses it went to get there. It's a whole neighborhood it had to go through to get there to the very end. The next thing is usually the overheads, because in those overheads, first of all, yes, that used to be the last thing I would put on a mix when I started doing, because it's all the shits in there, right? It's all the hash and all the stuff you don't want. My feeling is, let's pull that up, because it does have, unless it's just awful, which happens often, and there's so much stuff coming back in it, like, look, that's real. That's what we have to build around.
Sure.
Also, it is kind of the whole picture, so there's something kind of musical to it, but it's the beat of the kick, and then inevitably the snare is going to be in there, the toms, all the drums are going to be in there to some usual portion, and all the accents, all the excitement of the cymbals and the overheads. Those two elements, I don't spend a lot of time on the overheads. Like, I literally just probably high pass them to where they're not warbling.
Sure.
Pull those up with the kick. So now the snare's in there somewhere, but I'm not going for world-class snare sound. Then, and guys, this for me is the beginning of my mix. I then work on the bass guitar. Mm-hmm. And when I have the kick in the bass, and then the little extra peripheral stuff too, the rhythm, plus the other shit that's coming in there. That to me is when I, not to be too corny, get some sort of like emotional attachment to what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that everything prior to this was checking boxes, making sure, literally checking boxes, EQ on, high pass on, aux send on, you know, just checking boxes. This is when you turn to the other side of your brain and we enter into the creative thing. And this, despite all the procrastination, all the hesitation, and all the resistance that it often takes me to get to that point, there is such a feeling of relief because that's where I want to be.
That's
so
so
to
cool.
me, in a playback setting, and we can go what that looks like. The big question is, when do you introduce the vocal? But for me, it's when that, not when I have the most amazing snare sound ever. It's that. It's when there's a groove laid out. So
yeah, and that's awesome. And my stuff is along those same lines, but I will throw you one more that I'm sure that you do, whether you recognize it or not, or maybe you just didn't remember to say it, but the imaging of the overheads is the key to the whole thing for me, right? So when I bring up my overheads, I am making sure that the placement of where the snare is and the placement where the kick is are in the center of the image of that stereo drum. Because if they're not, if you're using your overheads for cymbal mics or whatever, and you're skewing your snare drum to the right, let's say, and it appears that the snare drum is coming at you from 2 o'clock, the phase that happens between the real snare drum that you put in later on and this snare drum that is your overheads causes some phasing. And also when it is in the right image place, there's summing that happens that makes the snare drum be super cool. And so, you know, placement of those microphones is important in order to achieve that, to get the right image of where it is. But it is something when I'm building a mix, when I first bring those up, and I do the same thing that you do. I go kick drum and I go right to overheads. And I actually spend a little more time with the overheads in that moment in EQing the overheads to make them, for lack of a better term, room mics for, you know, like a recording kind of a thing. So in other words, I want the fills in the toms to sound pretty good through those overheads, the snare drum to sound pretty good. The kick is usually not quite as good because you're high passing things up, but all those things, I want them to be so good by themselves, so that when I bring up the overheads, I could have just the overheads and, you know, maybe a kick and snare, and that would be, you know, a drum sound that it would be great. So I do exactly what you do. I spend probably a little more time on overheads, and then bass guitar, man. I'm a bass player. So, and getting that whole thing right, in getting the bass guitar with the kick drum correct, frequency wise, you know, all of it, getting those two things to lock together is the base of your whole mix. It's the whole, you know, I've described this before, probably on here on Pooch and Rabold, where I've said, you know, the kick drum and the bass guitar, if you think of your mix as like a flower, the kick drum and the bass guitar are the pot of that flower. Like, you know, if you didn't have that pot,
that. We haven't done that here. I like that a lot.
If you didn't have that pot, you couldn't do, you know, the flowery stuff, and all the awesome purple looking flower is the guitars and the, you know, all the other synthy things and whatever, those are the pretty things. But if you don't get the pot right and the soil, then that flower doesn't flourish. So I always think of it like that. It's important.
You know, and if you think about it too, the two kind of, for sure, bass guitar is Jedi level mixer live. Not just live, anywhere, studio, broadcast, I don't care what you're doing. Getting a bass guitar to work, to translate, to be musical, to be big and round, but not too big and round, you know, to be articulate and clear, but not too clacky and boingy, and, you know, all the things. And
also having all parts of the instrument
be a balance
of all of it. Yeah, because the number one problem I run into with bass guitars as some random kid at a club or whatever is his instrument is not, and the way his pickups are and all those things are not good. And so when he gets up into the upper register of the bass guitar, all of a sudden it all disappears.
It goes away.
Yeah. And so yes, getting that right, that is really important.
And that too, all of this, when you were talking about the overhead, about maintaining center image integrity, we'll say, with the snare.
Yeah.
Whether it's that or just, okay, what is even happening with this bass? We're starting with really the hardest of hard things and taking a real diagnostic look at them. Yeah. You know what I mean? Even if this is just kind of the quote unquote rough mix or beginnings of a mix, we're going to the really hard things and we're taking our first real diagnostic look at what is the balance of these overheads? What is the tonal balance of this guitar? So we might do a little to get us started, or we might do a whole hell of a lot, or you might have to do a whole hell of a lot just to get started.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, as you're talking about that bass player, I mean, I'm just immediately thinking of like multi-band compression. You know what I mean? And expansion. Of course I am.
And the reason that it's important in recording, but the reason it's really important in live sound is you're playing around with all those frequencies that are room resonance frequencies, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
And it is the crossover point between the subs and the bottom part of your PA. That instrument lives in that land, right?
Exactly.
And so getting those things to sound functional where the PA and the subs sound like they're working together as one. If they aren't right, man, do you notice that in your bass guitar? Like, the bass guitar is all of those frequencies and important.
Well, that's always my fear going from my main fear. There's two things. One, how is the vocal really going to respond?
Right.
But obviously that goes without saying, is a number one thing that I, worry or have the most emphasis on as it's going to translate to the live gig. But the one that is just slightly behind that is my low end overall.
Yes.
My bass, my kick, my toms, my synths, my everything going on down there. You almost hope if you show up and you put this mix into a PA and it's just Wolf City, you're good if it's Wolf City on all sources, because that means, well, we'll address it at the PA.
Right.
That's a quick fix. If it's only Wolf City sporadically, that means you screwed up somewhere along the lines.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So to your point, it's just going in there on getting the bass guitar involved very early. So important. It is the hardest thing you're going to deal with.
Yeah, because we always talk about how the vocal is the most important thing in the mix, and it is. But the difference between a regular good mixer and a world-class mixer is the world-class mixer gets the 60 hertz to 250 right.
That's it.
That's section it. In the PA, so I've heard guys say to me all the time, like, 2K to 8K, that's the hardest part of getting your mix. And I'm like, no, it's not. That part's easy. What's hard is 60 to 250.
60 to 250 is like being a diver in the Hudson River for a ring.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't see shit. It's everywhere. It's powerful.
Right.
Yes. That is so incredibly difficult to get in there and manage that.
That's right. And so getting that right. And I see, when someone sends me whatever, their mix bus, to listen to or whatever, it's almost always I'll have a comment about that section of frequencies, and getting that part to play together well, because it's not just the bass guitar. It's the bottom of the snare drum. It's there's kick drum in there. It's even like some bottom of guitars dip into that 200, 160 range, all all those things are all competing for information, and it's competing for intelligibility of each instrument in that murky, shitty sounding frequency range. You know what I mean? Like to me, like the most evil frequency range is that 125 to 250, maybe even just a little bit higher. That part is like, man, I spend days like trying to figure that out.
It's also the part, and I know we used to talk about this on this show. It's also, and I'm saying this because I used to do it as a early young mixer. Boy, I knew how to clean up a mix quick in my novice mind, and it was to just go hack all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you get older and you go, oh no, that's where the heart is.
Right. If you get it right and you get the right slope, if you're looking at, a smart or whatever, and you get that, people always ask me like, what does your mix look like? And I'm like, I like things to be linear, but there's that slope, +9 of low end, 60 hertz kind of thing. And then there's that slope, right? That happens until you get to the linearity somewhere around 250.
Sure.
Getting that slope right, man, it's where it's at. So
I had a systems guy recently on a gig, Vid, I cannot remember your last name off the top of my head. Vid
shout
from
out
Dubai.
To Vid.
Shout out to Vid, who I saw in Qatar. And on a very quick Zoom, or maybe it was Google Meet, so I can't remember what the forum was, but call that we did with a lot of information being exchanged quickly. He asked about the rise and about the target. And I stopped like, I know what you're saying, but I just want to make sure you're saying what I think you're saying, because I was so excited.
Yes.
That someone thought to ask that question.
Yes.
And then I would later, this is where you do pump people up where you can. I recognized the G in him in asking that question. And he knew who he was asking it to.
Right.
And, and I made a point in an email after the fact in front of God and everyone to say, hey, thank you for that. That didn't go unnoticed. Here's a screenshot.
Yeah.
And I could have sent a reference trace to. In other words, it's like that is the area. That is also the area that you will go to shows most times and you will hear sub and everything and skip the bass.
Yes.
And everything above.
Right.
And that's because it's safe and it's easy and it cuts out all of that stuff. But the real move.
But it doesn't have the ballsy impact,
It doesn't. And people won't be dancing or moving in whatever way that genre asks for. They will not be. They'll be getting pummeled. They'll have clarity, but they will not be moving. And
it's so important that whole, what we're talking about, just to finish up with that trace thing, my system engineer for Iron Maiden, shout out to Mike Hackman. He's the best system guy in the world. When we go to festivals or we go to guest PAs, which we do a lot of festival stuff. He has a trace of my normal day on.
He knows.
He has a trace of my normal day on my normal, cohesion. He takes that and forces whatever PA of the day is to do that. Follow that trace. And we both go, don't look at it. We're doing huge like EQ cuts and whatever to try to rein this thing in to make it be that that slope, because that's how much it matters.
You know what? And now that I think about it, with the experience that I had with Vid, the day of show was hectic and there wasn't a lot of time. And in the end, of course, as always, everything was totally fine. But so hectic and such little time that when there was time for me to actually listen to the system, ideally I do like to drag, and I had spec'd it all to where we were going to drag out 4 different measurement mics and we were going to do all the shit. Man, I didn't look at anything. I just turned it up.
Yeah.
And he had done a great job, and I made a very few changes, all of which went back come showtime. And when we sort of unpacked the experience after the fact, he's like, man, you know what I really appreciated, Chris? He's like, you didn't ask. And oftentimes I do. And to be honest with you, on another day, I would have, just for conversation's sake and clarity, I'd have been like, let me see what you did. He's like, you didn't look at anything. You just listened.
Yeah, I don't.
And I'm like, bro, Yes. And he had, we got to talking, and he had watched when we did these years ago. And there was a lot that came out that day, including my personality in not the greatest ways, but including my diligence and my attention to detail and these other things that also come along for the ride with me. And I was like, well, man, now like we weren't just bullshitting. Like we live by this stuff. You know what I mean? Including, despite my want and need for 4 measurement mics and to smart it to death and do blah, 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 none of that matters.
Totally.
None of that matters. Compared to how does it sound?
That's
you know what I mean?
That's right.
And then he noted that, and that was a cool moment for us too. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So that
anyway,
was cool.
So pushing forwards, after you get that kind of happening, the kick drum, the overheads, the bass guitar, you're happy with what's happening in that slopey range that we just talked about. What's your next go-to? I'm curious.
It depends on the genre. One thing I wanted to say real quick about the overhead thing, about your point of the centering. All of these things, guys, like, in other words, we're playing offense, right? We're creating. That's fun. That's the glory part of the job. We're creating. But don't think that we are not playing defense every step along the way too, including the intelligibility of the bass, the resonant frequencies of most rooms that are in bass. So in other words, we're cleaning it up to making it fun and palatable and musical, but we're also covering our asses that it doesn't just completely swamp us in the room.
Yeah.
The thing that you were talking about with getting the center image balanced, or maybe just understanding, it's not at all balanced and it's not going to be, and there are tricks to do that too, to deal with that. But what we're doing is, let's say you mix hot, like I happen to, into the stereo bus. By the time I do incorporate a real snare and overheads, and let's say there's claps, snaps, whatever from somewhere else, in the moments where that stuff does sum perfectly, it's one thing for it all to sum and to clip and be like, shoot, I got to pull it back. But when you're sitting there going, why is only the right side clipping? And it turns out the lowest volume element of everything, which was the overhead, that extra 3 dB that it's peaking over that, you know what I mean? Totally. Getting back to the notion of time, troubleshooting, vibe. So it's smart on a creative end, but it's really smart on a troubleshooting or on a, defensive, keep yourself safe.
Trying to make it all work and work quickly.
Make it all work. To answer your question, moving forward after that, it kind of depends on what I'm doing. This one particular case, it was a full 5-piece band and tracks, but tracks, I mixed their full show. In other words, when I left that one night in Lidditz, which I'll just fast forward to the end of the stories, I stayed there till 6 or 7 a.m. You know what I mean? Of course, as we do. And confirmed at the new Claire Global headquarters in Lidditz. I'm like, is this the first all-nighter that's happened in this building? And they confirmed to me it was. So I'm very proud of that.
Yay.
But there were some tracks, and I mixed it as if there were going to be all those tracks. So I guarantee you, I would typically go to keys after that, then guitars, then like horns, whatever it might be. I would kind of start going down the line again, just putting things in a rough place. I think on that one, I went to the tracks. No, I wouldn't have. What I would have done, I probably would have brought up some other elements, some other chordal stuff, but kind of just put it in its place. And I'll tell you this, when you've got the bottom end established and you've got your peak energy too established, it is at that point a little like paint by numbers, just put the pieces on top. Because to your point, whether it's the pot or the foundation or whatever the hell you said, that's what it is, y'all.
Yeah.
And you just put the little pieces where they go. A lot of times, though, I will, once I've gotten this sort of rhythm section happening in a bigger way, then I might go in and fine tune on the drums. But I'll tell you, even that is not everything. In other words, I'll go in and start really going at the snare. That's where some of my, it's got to be perfect, let me put this off, comes into play, But let's say I go at it and I start doing it. And I'll bring, and you talked about the imaging and the overheads. A lot of times you might think, well, the overhead's way over here, so it needs to be panned way over there. You will find between the placement of overheads and, more importantly, the insane amount of reflections coming back, that image is sort of smeary and almost mono-y. You
Yeah.
know, it's either super extreme if something's really close to the mic, or everything's kind of in the middle. So I might start pulling the hat up in to get some better idea of time, but I'm doing it with respect to where is it in that overhead picture.
Yeah.
So I'll start working in drums. I will leave toms. It's funny, and it's because toms are like one of my things that I got it. I got it. I will leave those till like literally right before the show sometimes. I mean, it's so funny. So anyway, after that for me, yeah, I might start honing in on the drums. I guess it also depends on if you're a person that uses parallel, if you start with it or not. Let's say like I've done it both ways. This year I've been starting without it. Then a move for me might be to get a drum sound and then start incorporating just a little bit of oomph that you get or a lot of bit of oomph you get from a parallel. I don't know, man. I can tell you're chomping at the bit for where you go.
No, not at all.
But tell me, because I'm curious, because my answer is kind of like, well, I do a lot of things, but it could be any of what I just said. I could just start adding the instrumentation. Notice I haven't said the vocal yet.
Yeah, right.
I will keep working on the foundational aspect of the music, because if I do it right, it has been my experience that in the end, I can take a vocal because I know I have enough room in the stereo bus. I suspect there's room sonically. That's when I'll put the vocal in. That's also when I'll find out, wah, 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 you know, my super cool dry snare may have just phased out because, you know, that's when reality really kind of takes over. So for me, it could look any number of ways, but it's typically one of those ways I just mentioned. What about you?
What about you? Before we get to me, when is your master bus inserts happening?
So that's a great question too. Yes.
So prior to, for me, up to this point that we've gotten to, like, I don't have master bus inserts in at all. This is me making a great sounding mix without those other tools.
Yeah, and this is where this might turn into parts 1 and 2. As you know, it's funny, y'all. Before we got on here, I was like, "Shit, we hadn't done this in a minute." And Pooch is like, "Let's just start talking, man. Let's just do it." I'm like, "I know, but it means a lot." And now I'm like looking at the clock, going, "We're never gonna finish this." In years past, particularly. It was just in years past, because my stereo bus chain was so tried and true and I never changed it, and because I was spoiled and I typically traveled with my own stuff, it's always on. I will tell you,
interesting,
new version of what I'm doing now. First of all, I'm largely just picking up. I'm not usually over-speccing it. I might just be using the desk. I might just be using Digico and Waves. I might be using, basically, I don't incorporate it until later. So it would not come now, and this is just 2025 for me that I've started doing this. I'm working on a new stereo bus path.
Okay.
And once I settle on that, I will just mix into it from the jump, and it'll be part of.
Interesting.
It'll be part of what I do. So you start without it, though.
Yes. My mix bus insert is the final solution. I want my mix to be top notch before I start messing with some of those things. And part of the reason is that one of my mix bus inserts is a high mid and low mid smearing and moving.
When you asked this question, that's what I was thinking about, was your spreading. Yeah.
So spreading and also pushing low end forward. One of the devices I use does that, the master bus processor, right? I want the mix to already feel like all of that is in its place and sounding great image wise and also frequency wise and all those kind of things. And then I want to add that to spirit, move it so that there's room for the vocal, but I want it to be right before that, if that makes sense. So, I trying to like really, I think I audition, right? Like I'll be
of course
mixing and then I'll punch it in every once in a while just to make sure that I'm headed in the right direction and not doing something totally stupid that when I put the insert in, it's, changes everything. I mean, we can have a conversation about this, for hours, because everyone thinks that the magic is the mix bus insert. Like, what are your mix bus inserts? It's like, it's not. The mix bus inserts for me anyway are just that little. I mean, it is. You have to be in front of near fields, punching it in and punching it out to really be like, oh wow, yeah, okay, I get what that's doing. But what happens to that in a large format PA is huge things. You know what I mean? So like when you're doing that in your near fields and you're getting your stuff together, little minute changes like that make a giant difference in speakers that are hung, 50 feet apart from the center. You know what I mean? Your imaging of things when speakers are that wide, when you add that particular insert, makes things be super huge. So anyway, yeah, I was just curious about when you introduce it. And also I am pretty much the only place that I mix into compression is drums. Like the rest of everything else, compression wise, is usually insert compression, not bus compression. Yeah. Although I do some bus compression as a last just little tickle, but not as a mixing into it to emphasize transients or any of that kind of stuff. For me, that's on the input side on inserts as opposed to buses. So it's a very different sound. Like if you guys aren't hip to it, learn the difference between putting a compressor on an input channel versus mixing into that compressor, so that when you're sitting there mixing and you push the bass guitar up, it makes that bus compression compress more. That's a different sound. It allows more transients to happen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I'll tell you, I think all of this is great. And if we kind of ride this off into the sunset on this one, I think it's worthwhile too. As far as, when do you add bus stage compression? And what you said, I'm with you. Drums, I will, my main drum bus for years, nothing was ever done to it. Then I'd do a little to it with some distortion and some compression a little, but by and large, it's not really. It's the parallel or parallels up plural buses that are doing the funky stuff, But I don't, even in the club days, only in the club days on analog, if I only had a handful of compressors, would I do bus compression? And I see subgroup compression rather. Right. I've got my guitars, my keys, my vocals. And you're right, it absolutely works in a leveling fashion. But when you're trying to push and accentuate something, it will go on top of its other sources that are with it. It will not go on top of the mix as a whole. At least not the same fashion.
It's working against you as you're pushing into it. It's actually, leveling it down.
It is.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I'll tell you this, I run into a lot of people who, when we're talking about gear or we're talking about process or whatever it might be, will mention their group processing. And guys, we're talking, depending on what console we're using, they're traditional subgroup processing. And it's interesting because if it's an older cat, I'll be like, well, I get it. Maybe that's like a holdover from the club days when you didn't have a lot. Or it doesn't really matter when it's from or when you're from. It is a viable thing, but it's one of two cases. One, it's an older cat who that's what they used to have to do. And now it's what they still do, only now because we have the access to 8 million compressors, you can also compress everything individually.
Right.
Or it is a younger cat, or not even a younger cat, a younger person who's so heavily influenced by the modern era of you gotta, and everyone seeming to have the answer, that they're just using too much shit everywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And totally. And so I'll ask someone, why do you have a guitar bus compressor? And I don't mean, why do you have that, dumbass?
Yeah.
I mean, truly tell me.
I want to know why.
I don't think that way.
Well, I think that we should also talk about, I think it's weird, man. I think that people don't have a concept of what compressors are doing and how to use them. To me, there's two kinds of compressors. There's a leveler, right? That's helping you to emphasize an instrument, that is loud and soft. That's leveling. But then there's the other compressor is a transient shaper. You're all you're doing is working on your attack and your release of what's happening with your transients. And that is when you figure that out and how to do that, that's an incredible tool to make your things, be intelligible in your mix.
Yes. I'll tell you what else too. And this is a topic for a later time, but there's also, yes, 100%. I could not agree with those statements more. Also, what different types of compressors sound like. There is, go to any show, and I have both been guilty of this and choose to still do this, but with awareness. I'm doing it because I've thought about it and I know why I'm doing it. There will be a rack, an analog rack, and if you look at it, it's just nothing but VCA bus compressors.
Right.
And which is a killer sound. It is an easily identifiable sound. It's a great sound to learn early on because you're like, oh, that's how you get that sound. But when you then apply that sound to everything, it just ends up sounding like a rock'em sock'em robot kind of mix. Totally. You know what I mean? There's like, where's the FET or where's the octo? Oh, you got one on your vocal. Okay. Where's and I don't mean this on a super nerd level, but there is something to be said for flavor and compression,
Absolutely.
More than something to be said, a lot to be said.
A lot can be said. Yeah. So that's something that you should learn, whether it's analog or a plug-in. There are compressors that have a sound to them, and the reason people use Fairchilds, for example, the reason someone uses a $30,000 compressor is not necessarily for what it does compression wise. It's for what it's doing with the transformer, how it's making harmonic distortion, what's the overall tone that, like, if you take a signal, a left and a right, you put it through a $30,000 Fairchild and don't have any compression on it, there is a timbre change that happens that is not related to the compression. It's just you're putting it through that unit, and that unit has that sound. So get that in your repertoire. Like, what does an 1176 sound like? What does an LA2A sound like? Not just what it does as a compressor, but what does it do when I don't do anything compression wise, when I just send a signal through it? That matters,
Yeah. And if it didn't matter, then just use the desk and have everything do 3 dB of compression and off you go. You know what I mean? We've had this conversation, and I don't want to go too far askew here, but it is why I use a Digico desk, because all of the things in the desk are so transparent. Like, all of it is so transparent. Everything, compressors, gates, all that stuff is transparent as hell. It's so that I can have some things that are transparent, but also use something else like waves or an analog piece of gear to dirty some things up. And it's having the play of those two things, to me, is what makes a Digico great, as opposed to some other well-known consoles, Yamaha, Avid, whatever. They have their compressors, and their stuff that's in their desk is very much dirty, for lack of a better word. It has a timbre change to it. When you hit their compressors hard, it does a timbre change, much like some analog compressors do. It's just a different way of thinking, but it's like, it's something to think about when you're making a choice about what you're using. But anyway, I don't want to go too far right in that. But no, I hear you. I just one way to. I'll just mention this because I do want to talk about this some more later on some further Pooch and Rabolds. But part of the reason, I've been wanting to change up my stereo bus path for a long time. I'm finally doing it, but I haven't landed on anything, or I haven't landed on like a starting lineup. It's what I'm using for sure. I have bits and pieces, but I'm not sure. So between that sort of ethos of mine now, where I'm like, all right, we're starting over, I'm doing things different. That has me going to the bus compression later on in making different choices, much later than I usually would have. It also has me using less.
Yeah.
I will tell you, at the last gig I just did, no one's asking what my LUFS reading is or my RMS. No one gives a shit.
No one cares.
They don't.
Yeah.
But I care.
Yeah.
And it's fun, and it gives me a standard, and it gives me something to shoot for. At the last gig, I had a Waves SSL bus comp on, you just straight up, that on there. And at the beginning of the mix, I was like, oh yeah, I'm really going to dig into this thing. I just thought I was going to do like 3 or 4 dB or something.
Yeah.
I loosened it up as the show goes. There was a new Waves L4 limiter on there. Again, all just stock Wave stuff. By the end, I had the SSL was doing something, because you can't take the threshold past plus 15.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But when I say something like a dB.
Tickle. Yeah.
The L4 was doing, I'd noticed, because I looked at the end of the show, it had at some point in its existence done 3.6 dB, right?
Exactly.
So between 1 and the really heavy-handed stuff, oh God, at 3.6, and I looked at my thing, and at one point in time, I looked at the WLM meter, and I was doing -8 LUFS by essentially just mixing.
Yeah.
And shaving off the peaks of the peaks of the peaks. So it didn't take a lot to get it big and loud, probably too loud. That's honestly a little too loud for me live. And so there's one thing, and I will say this too, and moving on. A couple years ago, when I was really in the shit, but I had enough of it, I had enough left in me to get up off the couch and go do something. We went out and we were doing this Beyonce tour, and I was talking to her mix engineer, her tracking engineer she's worked with forever, my buddy Stu. And I had a saturation device on that really wasn't going super hard, but I had it on the stereo bus like I always did at the time. And he was like, well, man, why are you doing that? And I didn't fight it, first of all, because he and I had developed it. And plus I was curious, like, where's this going? And I'm like, well, blah, blah, blah. It gives me these harmonics and blah, blah, blah. I'm saying real shit, but I'm kind of saying the stock stuff. And by the end of it, he's like, we've worked so hard to put so much saturation everywhere in this mix already. He's like, bro, I don't think we need it at the end. And you know what? He was right.
Interesting.
And I took it off. So as I'm moving forward now, my thinking is I do so much distortion or saturation or whatever you want to call it along the way.
Along the way.
Then now I'm at the point where I really don't need it to end. So now I'm at a stage in my career where I'm going back looking for more transparency as opposed to color at the end stage, for what it's worth.
Yeah. It's interesting because I also think in a big, giant, bold statement, the difference between a good mixer and a world-class mixer nowadays in this digital world is how they manage their harmonic distortion, right? And how they manage the way the transients react with, with the, what we've just been talking about, the transparency versus dirty versus clean, and getting all those things right is a man. It's an interesting thing,
And there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with this too. I'm thinking about one of these gigs that I did where I was setting up the mix and I had tracks, and with those tracks I had the previous mixer's stereo bus, right?
Yeah.
And I knew what their stereo bus was because I knew what their stereo bus was. Meaning what all was involved with it. And when I finally got to, so basically that's how I started mix, and I add things, and at the end I add the vocal, and then blah, 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 blah. And there's a mix. So at the point I'm done with my mix, I go, and if there happens to be an older mix that I think I want to reference, like this person had success. So I went and I listened to their mix and I pulled it up, and immediately and when I finished my rough mix that night, I was probably around -15 to -12 LUFS, like pretty normal live mix.
Sure.
Wasn't at all into like record level stuff. And would have been totally happy to sit there. And I get his mix, and oh God, is it loud. It is so loud, but I'll tell you, and I knew that it had 3 saturation things going on before it. So it would do the 3 saturation pieces and the compression. And then what I can only assume is some further stage limp, whatever. it was so loud that I could see for a minute being like, wow. But the second you stopped and listened to it, it was just this sponge of loud.
Wow.
Like there was no transient. It was just a spongy loud thing, but there weren't any spikes or peaks or things that made you move or get scared or feel a certain way. It was just a big spongy ball of loud. So, buyer beware right now in the saturation craze, of which you and I are maybe the two biggest proponents of out there. But
you can screw yourself up royally by doing it wrongly.
Yes.
So
you can.
You have to experiment with it, and I say use it sparingly, but getting all those things right really makes a difference. In recording world, they're always comparing analog tape to digital, whatever. And I saw something online a few days ago about, this really nerdy engineer guy was doing measurement of like what the noise ratio of analog tape was, and then comparing it and putting it in terms of digital world, so that we always talk about, the supreme of digital world is 192 at 24-bit, blah blah blah. And he was like, if you take analog tape and use it in the same terms, you'll discover that analog tape is like 13 bits. It's not, you know what I mean? It is doing some really hardcore shaping to stuff, and all of that is pleasing to the human ear to a point. So you have to walk this line between, having that in there and having the warmth of that, but not going over the top like what you described with a guy that had, three distortion making boxes on his mix bus. So it's something definitely worth experimenting in taking. Say you're that guy that is like, hey, I'm having some success in my career. I'm mixing, a band that's maybe doing some arenas, or I'm opening up for a larger band. And I want to take my mixes to the next level. That's where you should look first, in my opinion.
Yes. Yep. And you know what, that ties back into what you said, of that when we apply the stereo bus processing, it shouldn't be everything radically changes.
No, it isn't.
In whether you start with it or apply it later on, neither is right, neither is wrong. It's just what you process, and but it should take your mix. You should have a really good mix, just raw, essentially. And then when we do add these things, we're only then making it better. But we want to have it to where if all of those things go away, if all of the toys go away, we've still got something that we stand by.
Yeah. 100%. That is true. So let's talk about, just to kind of, sum this up. So let's talk about vocal a little bit. Like when do you insert your vocal, or where do you start spending a bunch of time on your vocal when we're talking about playback mix?
Thank you for getting us back on track. So by the time I've got music, and again, it depends on how much time, and I keep referencing this one gig where I had a night, a day and a half essentially to work. If I knew I still had a week to go, I might bounce it 2 a.m. and go, hey, great start. That's not what this was. So once I got to a place where I was like, hey, there's no more time.
Right.
And then you start getting kind of scared because the sun is going to come up. You do have to stop. And, it's like, shit. So it's usually once I've got the music and I've incorporated the tracks. That's a huge part of, when I'm pulling up the tracks, where are they landing? How does it all meld together? Again, only if there are tracks, right? But, it does create a whole other element altogether. Once everything's balanced properly, usually that's when, and a lot of people, and you'll hear a lot of folks, particularly in the studio, where they're kind of working with the vocal from the beginning. Yeah. Because our vocals are often polluted because of mic technique or ambience or whatever it had, whatever it might be. I'm kind of using the fact that I'm bringing it in at the last minute in my favor, and that there's a lot of other stuffs, because to just listen to the vocal on its own, you might really be inclined to be like, oh my God, how am I going to get out of this? This is,
for real.
So yeah. So that's when I will bring the vocal in. That's when I will already have looked at the waveforms. I will look at it on the console. I will figure out how dynamic this person is or isn't, how hard they're singing. And that will determine all of my processing choices after that. Of course, I want to stomp on it as much as I can. Of course, I want to lock it in. I want it to be polished. I want it to be modern sounding. I want it to be all those things. But I can, even without having a PA, I already know, I'm only going to be able to get away with a little bit of EQ, a little bit of whatever, dynamic EQ, multi-band compression, and just a few dB on the compressor. And that's probably it. Or I'm like, oh boy, here's one where I can really go ham with it. So it is at the late stage, but I don't just go blindly once I get to it. Like, I assess what it looks like. And I also listen to, what does this mix sound like when the person's vocal microphone is on,
yes,
and they're not singing into it. And then of course, then we get into all the toys, of how we, keep that at bay and stuff. But it's at the end, and it's, there's the tonal shaping, which is the big thing. Like, I don't incorporate effects till much later. Like, I'm working on usually the driest of dry vocal sounds, just to get rid of resonances, any who, or any mid-range stuff that's poking out. I just want to level it tonally. Then I'll start adding effects. I don't know. I guess I won't go too much further into that, other than it's at the end.
Yeah.
And by that point, I know so much of what is surrounding that vocal. I know what I can and can't get away with the vocal.
Yeah. I mean, geez, for me, it is all of that, like getting the vocal right and great sounding by itself, whatever. But I spend hours placing the vocal in my mix and then going, ooh, that's not working.
Yes.
What do
that's the inevitable. Right.
And actually making mixed decisions based on what's happening in that person's microphone. Like, for instance, Iron Maiden stage is so loud. It's like, there's 62 M4 wedges, it's just nuts. So there's a lot of information of other things in it. And, it's a lightsaber of sound as he runs across the stage,
yes.
And points it at things. And so
you're
you have
roving reporter.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to manage that, but you also can't clamp down on it so hard that you get this expansion, when he is singing all of a sudden, and hearing that expansion happen, you can get away with a lot more than you think you can. Like, if you solo up Bruce's vocal, there's quite a bit of that, like happening.
But you know how to smear it properly.
Exactly. But I'm smearing it, and I'm also taking into account the other parts of my mix that are covering that up. Right. Mm-hmm. So to me, there's this whole play that happens where trying to fit the vocal into your existing mix and actually making decisions post what say you already had your band like killer, you thought it was great, you put the vocal in it, you're like, ooh, not great. Now I got to make a decision over here to either make the guitar have certain amount of EQ to cut through the expansion that's happening in the vocal, blah, 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 blah. That's, and so that to me is in the last step before I get to my mix bus insert with the vocal, is this whole play. And I spend hours with it. I'm such a freak about it.
I love
it. Because when I hear the expansion happening, I'm way more sensitive to it than anybody else is. And so I have to like kind of figure out how far I can get away with it. You know what I mean? Yep. It's like, how far am I going to get away with it? And also how not to have it sound like that when he's talking in between
that's what's
songs.
going through my mind. Yes. Yeah.
So,
I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah.
As a whole.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it sound like I only spend 3 to 12 minutes on
it.
No.
I didn't mean to make it sound
and I'm not experiencing that you said that, but because the reality is there's the mix before you've put the vocal in.
Yes.
Live.
And then there's
the mix after it. Right. Yes. And I will do this thing where I will pull up this mix and I'll get it sounding good. And man, there's nothing like being in a warehouse or at home or wherever it is, and it is 3 a.m. and I purposely put it at a manageable volume. Yeah. I leave it playing. I might loop it. I walk away. I go do something, and I walk back in, and it's just that feeling of like, wow, I love what I do. This is great. Totally. Because the reel is coming next, and that is when you turn the vocal on. That is when, in all but the best of situations, that awesome mix you had, you will start tweaking it, right?
Yes.
Because of everything you're saying, and
because it's the loudest thing in your mix, right? So the vocal being the
most important thing, and for all of the tools we now have, from PSE to D feedback to whatever it might be, run the spectrum of them. What do they do at low level? Yeah. What do they do to the vocal that is no longer a vocal, that is now a conversation piece to the, so you're constantly thinking, okay, I can get away with this when they're singing, but when they're not, am I turning it off? These little special pieces, or am I just augmenting it? Am I riding it? And then this is when, a lot of the nuance really comes into play. This is when the mix gets real, because trust me, if anything's going to be on, it's that vocal.
Yeah. Dude. And those are the type of little things that I work on 2 months into. Mm-hmm. We've been doing shows for 2 months, and I'm still like, man, in between songs, it's still got the little bit of that expand, like how, and working it so that it works, or making snapshots that are different for in between songs than they are for songs, and adjusting threshold of the PSE, for different parts of the song. I'll do that.
Totally. And you learn as the show, 2 months into the show, where they're standing on the stage or thrust or under the PA or in front of a front fill. Yeah. There's so many things that are going to go in your mind. Yeah. They're going to shape how you handle all of that moving forward. Yeah.
It's funny because, Iron Maiden fans are always talking about, oh, I wish I was at the very first show of that tour. And I always say to them, it's like, yeah, I mean, we've done some rehearsals and I got it pretty good, but if you go to the 50th show,
trust me,
it's going to be better than that first one,
always. And it's funny too, how after a while, there's so much of it. You're like, oh, I was nowhere close. Yeah. Or you're like, damn it, I really captured lightning in a bottle fast there at the jump. And I need to, at least in that one particular instance, go back and bring back what I did, because now I've gone way too far,
Totally.
So
totally.
No, I get that.
Yeah.
But this is, of course, we're talking about, again, when we're building a mix away from a show, and this looks largely different than it would. And maybe we talk about that at some point in time too, when you are just spinning it up. Like, what is your process? What are you looking for? Where do you
I just want to also point out that I think we kind of skipped over it, but the process of building this offline file before you show up makes it so that if I have any kick drum that I put a 91 into it and then put it through the path that I have created and gain it to where I know it sounds good, that starting point of that kick drum is pretty great. Like, it's not, it's like, literally the right microphone in any kick drum with the right path, with the right compression stuff, is why it's so important to have this template built before you even show up, because that first few moments of, especially if you're having to smile and dial, like if it's, hey, this is it, and you're getting a sound check, those situations, they're already set and routed and ready to go for you, that hey, if I gain the guitars up to -10, it'll fit in my mix perfect. If I gain the bass guitar up, and because you've built this template over the years that where your mix lies. Like, I can I can build a mix almost by just looking at it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because of the template that I have. Now, listen, I do, the kick drum doesn't just magically appear. Every kick drum sounds different than every other one. So there is tweaks that I have to make. But if you're smiling and dialing, and if you're a guy that has to build mixes quickly, that's how you do it.
Yeah. I was, I had listened to someone, I had a conversation with someone not too long ago, and we were talking about literally the human brain and how, we go through our existence and we see things and we experience these things, and those things have a place in our brain, so that when we then walk into that same scenario for the second to 128 billionth time later, it's not just this brave new world of like, what is this?
Yeah, right.
And the same thing holds true in audio.
Yeah.
In that, like you said, we've been here long enough, and I know if I hit my marks, and I know if things land in the right place because of my experience tells me that equals music, So it's only sensible and logical to be able to move like this, because time is money, and whatever other phrase you want to throw at it, the quicker we can get to an end result, the better it is for everyone.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Just something that clicked in my head was, Rob Reiner obviously got killed the other day. Horrible.
Yeah,
but one of the things that Rob Reiner did was, no matter what, when he had a filming day, their end time was always that end time. So let's say at 6 p.m.
Whatever, loved him for that.
Right?
Loved.
Yes. And so at 6 p.m., everyone knew that they were going to be able to go home and have dinner with their families, which is unlike any other thing in this industry. And you translate that to us in our world. If you can work fast enough and not be the reason that they're being held up, if you can stay out of the way of being the reason that things aren't progressing forward, then you'll be loved right off the bat.
And you'll have work forever. Look, this is also the way that, years ago, I remember Chris Lord-Alge sort of famously came out with the fact that he kept regular business hours. He worked during the day. It's the same thing. The sessions are delivered. His assistants hit all the marks. His gear's already set. He comes in there and he just does it.
Yeah.
The Rob Reiner thing's great, because a lot of times it's hard. I mentioned there's nothing like walking into a room at 3 a.m. and listening to your mix. And that's all the romantic stuff that I love about this. But it's hard to maintain that. In other words, it's not just, I waited till late at night and it was this deep exploration of my soul that produced this. It's far more easier to standardize your approach.
Yeah.
And be consistent. And people, when they look, there's how many directors or artists or musicians, whatever it is, who you have no idea what time you're finishing. And to meet someone who really means it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they stick to it. Like, I bet you and again, much like when we started talking, empowering that drum tech and the way you work with them, you treat people that way with a workflow they can predict and see the results, they're going to work harder for you. It's going to make the WHOLE of things way better.
What one last thing is, we're kind of coming to the end of this one, is that ties into this is, I've been watching that Taylor Swift Eras tour thing. That's on Disney or whatever. And it's really interesting. And the reason it ties into this explanation is, in all of those things that I've been watching, she is so professional. She's like, we're here from 2 p.m. until 6 p.m. and we will these are the things that I want to get done. Boom, 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 boom. And it's so appreciative of us as crew people when the artist is not that, shows up late, drunk,
Exactly.
and then
we're not at all.
Oh, yeah. And wants to hang out on the stage for 4 hours afterwards while you're just standing there because there's nothing going on. And so I kind of was like, wow, that's cool that she's like that. And I think it's an example for, some other artists that are up and coming.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So,
People notice, when we all notice everything, I mean, everyone notices. I mean, forget even the principal and what they're doing, but most notably the principal and their work ethic and their,
yes.
their
Because it
awareness of
trickles from the
others.
top down, right? Like, it's top down. Like
It
if the principal's a mess, everyone
right.
else is a mess. Yeah.
Yeah. No, totally, totally.
Anyway,
Well, cool. You want to call that a show?
I call it a show.
Check it out, y'all.
I
Pooch
like
wears
it.
that every day. You think it's specific to the holidays, but it's not.
No, I only wear it at Christmas time, but my family loves it. So
I bet they do. I bet they do.
Anyway.
You should go out in public with it. And see how much everyone loves it too.
I don't know if I got those kind of balls.
Right.
But
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
All right, dude. Great talking with you again. And let's do a couple more of these maybe, huh?
We'll do some more of these. Happy holidays, y'all. It's really, 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 really awesome to be back.
Yeah, man. Merry Christmas, y'all. See ya.
See ya.